Happy New Year. It is New Year's Day and I'm in central London and I'm going to do a Beatles walk, trying to find all the different sites and locations, and the pavements are full of sick. So over my shoulder, very famously, the London Palladium. I'm using this book as a guide. I'll put a little link to it. It's very good if you're in London. And into the Beatles. The Beatles played here 3 times, most famously in October 1963 for the Variety performance, which was one in the leading TV shows in Britain. And it was October 1963 and they got a lot of press obviously for doing this, but because it was such a big show in England or Britain, there was a lot of press here. And the Beatles, who were used to having lots of screaming audiences in Liverpool, weren't used to it in London, and there being so many people screaming for the Beatles here, the press didn't really know what was going on, and the next day there were front page news in all the British papers, and they were viewed on the Variety performance to so many millions of people, one of the highest viewed TV shows at the time in England. I wasn't around to appreciate it, but yeah, that kind of was the beginning of the term Beatlemania, which wouldn't be coined for another couple of days, couple of weeks, but almost the birth of Beatlemania was at the London Palladium. I do a series somewhere where the Beatles played, but they do sometimes run tours of the Palladium, so I'll do that when I can tour it, if I can tour it. And here was the old NEMS offices. If I can just zoom in, Brian Epstein's blue plaque up there. They moved in, Brian Epstein, they, pronouns, moved in March of 64, and they were there until just after Brian Epstein's death in August of 1967. The Beatles were always in here, often in here for meetings, and they did press interviews right next door to the Palladium. There's lots of Beatles pictures on top of this building. Can I get back and show you? I don't think I can. It's very big. On top of that building and the Palladium, there's lots of Beatles pictures. And it was here where John Lennon gave the infamous "We're more popular than Jesus" interview. And so yeah, it would have been there where John Lennon gave his "We are more popular than Jesus" comment to Maureen Cleave, I believe it is, who has only recently passed away herself. I assume you all watched the Get Back documentary, and that scene where, and then there was 2, a really sad scene, really weird, because all these things I'll talk about today, nearly everybody's gone, and still that documentary, which is 69, Still Paul and Ringo, they are like the only two that are left. Mal Evans, Brian Epstein, even journalists they were speaking to are gone now. So just round the corner from the Palladium is Kingly Street. There is so much sick on the floor. It's insane. So the building over my shoulder with the tree, that was O Nails Nightclub, and in the 60s the Beatles came here a lot of the times after recording at Abbey Road, came here for a drink. Jimi Hendrix famously played here, but in Beatles history is probably most famous for in March of 1967, Paul McCartney, who had his own private table here. Paul McCartney was always in here. Paul McCartney went to see, I think it was Georgie Fame, and also going to see Georgie Fame that night was Linda Eastman, who would become Paul McCartney's wife, and you see her, if you've just watched the Get Back, she's in that quite a bit. And yeah, they were married for a long time until she died, unfortunately. But that was O Nails Nightclub. It was the 18th of January 1967 where Paul and Ringo saw Jimi Hendrix in there, and it was 15th of May of the same year that Paul met Linda in there. I believe it was down in the basement where the gigs would happen. There's a famous picture of John Lennon stood here. If I can find the picture, I will put it on. Just a little side point on my walk. Should be taking 5 hours this walk, so yeah. So a little side point on the Beatles walk. This behind me was the Bricklayers Arms, and it was here that the Rolling Stones first ever rehearsed. Brian Jones put his advert in the paper, and Keith Richards and Mick Jagger came for their audition in there, and that's where the Rolling Stones were born. There used to be a tongue in that window, the Rolling Stones tongue. It's the first time I've seen it without it, so I don't know where that's gone. Anyway, back to the Beatles. Everything's so close. It's always a thing I remember about London. Such a big city, but everything you want to see is always so close. So this was Trident Studios. This is where... Let me switch around. I didn't realise it was so sparse these days. So yeah, Trident Studios was used by the Beatles famously for Hey Jude, mainly because it only became a studio around the time of Hey Jude, like 67, 68, but it had an 8-track, and the Beatles, using EMI Abbey Road, didn't have an 8-track, they only had a 4-track. Would you believe it? They did Sgt. Pepper on a 4-track. And so they would come here more often after 68 to use here. They did Hey Jude famously, and straight after they did Dear Prudence. Martha My Dear was here, so quite a few Beatles songs. I Want You, She's So Heavy was here, mainly because I had an 8-track. Bohemian Rhapsody I think was done here, and probably most famous, let me switch around, David Bowie did Hunky Dory and the Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust, and this is where his blue plaque is. Yeah. Trident Studios. I'll put a little list of other songs by other people that recorded here, but very famous. So we are in Chinatown for the next bit. Welcome to the sick on the floor. It is everywhere. Morning.
Morning.
Yeah, I'm not bad, are you? Happy New Year. Now, here there are famous Beatle pictures. That way. I'll cover both bases, I'll do both sides. There's a few more Beatle pictures from here, I'll show you. Let me go wide. So it's got to be that way around, doesn't it? Quite low. Over here. Where are they? Something like that. So this is the Prince of Wales Theatre here in London. There's a guy pissing behind me, so I'll be careful. How gross. This is where the Beatles did the Royal Variety performance in 1963. And I think I might have said that at the Palladium. Well, this is the variety performance. The other one was the famous Palladium show with Bruce Forsyth. I wasn't alive at the time. Give me a break. This famously somewhere where the Beatles played. Famously is where John Lennon said,
"For our last number, I'd like to ask your help. But the people in the cheaper seats, clap your hands. And the rest of you, if you just rattle your jewellery."
The charm and wit is part of what made the Beatles the Beatles. And his blue plaques there. Lord Delfont of Stepney. Bubba Gump. We got all different kinds of shrimp. The sun is coming up over London. Quite nice when it's quiet. Get used to this. So, number 6, Mason's Yard, was Indicia Art Gallery, and it was here in November of 1966 where John met Yoko. I believe the art exhibition would have been on the ground floor here. It was where John Lennon said he walked in and there was a ladder going up to the ceiling, and he read it, and it was was it yes? Something positive, and that started the conversation, and that's where John met Yoko in 1966. Now, if I'm correct, we turn the corner, and I am, we're on Saville Row, which I have never seen Saville Row this quiet. I have been here before. Probably has more significance now, I guess, after the Get Back film to people. And this is Beatles offices, and if we pan up, the blue placards are This was a clothes shop whenever I've been here. No, it's gone. Don't know what that will be. It's interesting. So this is where the offices would have been, down here. There won't be anything to see. This is where the studio would have been. This is where the Beatles would have walked down. The door's locked. But you see the Beatles walking down here, don't you? In the Get Back thing. You see that sign, Saville Row, a lot. Although it's a different one now. And of course, this is where everybody was stood, because the Beatles were playing up there. You see the apple scruffs and stuff stood around here, don't you? The documentary, waiting for them just to get a glimpse. Strange, isn't it? Don't know why, but it is. I think maybe because that documentary's so fresh. And how quiet it is today just adds to it. I don't know why. We all just spent hours watching that thing, didn't we? It all happened there. Very weird. Cool though. So I hope you're enjoying it. That's Saville Row. We're just walking away. I'll spend this time to have a bit of a chat. It is New Year's Day, hence it's so quiet. And that's why I wanted to do this. That's why I'm in London, to do this on New Year's Day. I will take this time just to mention the book. Not mine, nothing to do with me. But as thousands, hundreds of Beatles locations, and right at the start of the book they've mapped out, if you're not in London for very long, just a quick little walk, which is what we're doing. 20 locations, including Saville Row. This is where we're walking. And yeah, I really recommend it. A long time since I've been to Saville Row, and I do that series somewhere where the Beatles played, and the ultimate goal is to get on top of that, but it won't ever happen. So say goodbye to Saville Row. I don't know when I will next be here. Where's next? I have no idea. So, the Thai building, Thai Airways, this was Brian Epstein's offices. More private for him than Argyle Street where we started. This is the London House, that was called. This is where he rented and worked NEMS from 65. Beatles were here lots and lots of times for various meetings. The meeting where they decided to do Apple Records, their label. The meeting for that took place in here. And obviously that was after Brian Epstein's death, so the Beatles continued to use it after his death, Brian Epstein's death. I believe his offices are on the fourth floor. So, well, top of your screen there. I might show you a picture of him in the office. I will do that, and I'll show you the office today, but it's been owned by Thai Airways since the 70s. So roughly when NEMS and the Beatles sold it, it became Thai Airways soon after. So we're having freakishly warm weather for this time of year in England. It's like going to be like 15 degrees New Year's Day. I'm stood in the middle of the street in central London. Brian Epstein's offices are just behind me. Thai Airways now. Thai. I'm going to do a Brian Epstein video. I'm not going to where he died today. Like I said in one of the Liverpool videos, there's a statue coming to Liverpool where the NEMS store was, or near where that was, and I'll do a Brian Epstein story one day soon. But we're heading to Mayfair now. So yeah, if you just come off of Hyde Park, we're in Mayfair, very expensive. I'm getting dodgy looks, I don't fit in, and you turn up these steps. Let me turn you around. It's the infamous cursed flat. And I'll probably do a longer video on this one day. But you see, people say it's this flat here, but they're wrong. It's this one up here, which you can't overly see. And that's the bedroom there. This is where Mama Cass and Keith Moon both died. Yeah, two massive stars both died in the same apartment. The apartment was owned by Harry Nilsson, and feels like it's been a while since I popped in with a message. We are at Green Street. Can you see that? Green Street. This is 57 Green Street. Never been here, so if you see it, give me a shout. 57 Green Street is the only place all four Beatles lived together. When the Beatles first came to London, they stayed in hotels and were encouraged to get their own place, and they got a place together, and it was down here. There are some famous pictures. Have you seen any numbers? 6. So down this side. So they moved in September 1963. John and Paul left by the end of November of the same year. John moved in with Cynthia and Julian, his wife and son. Nice Bentley over there. But Ringo and Julian then moved to the second floor. The Beatles were in flat L, which was the top floor, and when John and Paul left, they moved to the second floor. This was 63, so this is the height of Beatlemania, so around here would have been carnage with fans, and the fans would stay here all day even when they weren't in the country. They would be here waiting in case they were trying to trick people, or the Beatles. But the fans stayed out here even after John and Paul left, and the landlady, Thorogood, Mrs. Thorogood, was getting quite irate, and George and Ringo left after the Beatles returned from their first America trip in February of '64. So as I say, Paul moved in with the Asher family, which is where we will be going to. There was a very famous photograph of the Beatles taken in there, which I'm sure I've put up. But yeah, interesting. So this is 95 Wigmore Street, the original offices of Apple, but wasn't a very successful one, and they moved to Saville Row in July of the same year, so they weren't here very long. The main reason is Apple was a record shop, a record label, and in the premises they weren't allowed to play records, which is a minor problem. The lease expired in January '69, so they left, but they were out by July. The Beatles would have been in here quite a lot, using Brian Epstein's suites and offices for various things. So this is the Asher family home, 57. So not the red door, that door. And this is where Paul McCartney lived from the end of '63 until about 66, 67, and they split up in July of '68, so sometime he moved out before then. This is where Paul wrote most of his mid-60s tunes. Most of all his tunes from Rubber Soul were written in here. I'm Looking Through You, Michelle, etc. And yeah, he lived here for many a time, and probably the most famous or important Beatle moment happened down in the basement, which I'm certainly not going to walk into. It was down there where John and Paul sat down on Richard Asher's piano and wrote I Want to Hold Your Hand, which exploded them into America. The whole of the Asher family lived in here. Jane Asher's father was a famous doctor, or a well-renowned doctor. Jane Asher was an actress who posed screaming for Beatle pictures for a magazine. And this is how she met Paul McCartney, through doing this photo shoot. They went backstage and met the Beatles. Paul moved into his own flat in '66, and they split up just after they got engaged in 1968. So yeah, it was down there where John and Paul wrote "I Wanna Hold Your Hand." And we are now going to Baker Street. This isn't too far away down here. So this is Baker Street in London, where the famous Apple boutique shop was. And if you can see, John Lennon blue plaque and George Harrison. I'll take a picture for you. And this shop opened on the 7th of December 1967, and then it famously closed when they gave away everything. It's probably most famous for the artwork that was on the front, painted by the Dutch people, the Fool, if memory serves. But neighbours complained, saying it wasn't in keeping with the area, and so they stripped it bright white. Is that right? Stripped it bright white and had the word apple was simply written on it. They were gonna open up other shops, but they never came to fruition. The offices above were the first headquarters of Apple Music. You see the famous footages of the Beatles getting sent all their music and videos and all their creativity. The building isn't the same anymore. It was demolished in the 70s. It was an 18th century building and it was knocked down. Good morning. And we will now continue our walk. I think we're going to quite a cool location next. So we go from one John Lennon blue plaque to another. This is 34 Montague Street, which was Ringo's residence in London. But when John left Cynthia to be with Yoko, it was down in the basement flat, which was Ringo's. He gave to John and Yoko. Ringo moved here in 1965, early 1965. Paul McCartney used here for recordings and stuff. Eleanor Rigby was first recorded down in here. Jimi Hendrix stayed here. John's mother-in-law, Lillian, stayed here. It's also where John Lennon got busted for cannabis, which would greatly affect his residence in America, his green card and everything. That's what they used against him. And that happened here. The infamous naked cover of Two Virgins, that was done down in here as well. It's 34 Montague Street. because of the John Lennon cannabis raid, the estate, I'm not sure who, won an injunction against Ringo to prevent illegal, immoral and improper use of the flat. And so he sold the lease on this flat. And that was in 1969. Yeah. Some cool John Lennon history in there. Alright, just outside Montague Square, we're heading to Marleybone, the train station and the registry office, where two Beatles got married. If you are enjoying, please like and subscribe. It's been a nice walk, but quite long. I deserve a like, I'm sure. Anyway, we shall continue. I think I'm going the right way. So this is Marleybone Registry Office. This is where two Beatles got married. Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr both got married here. Paul McCartney married Linda in 1969, March of 1969, and then in April of 1981 and it was here in April of 1981 where Ringo got married. It was the first time that Paul, George and Ringo had been publicly seen together since John had died, and that happened right here, Marleybone Registry Office. Ringo married Barbara Goldbach, and they have the same registrar for both weddings. How truly unique. On both occasions there was large crowds of people where we are now. Still, all those years later, I suppose they still got it today, wouldn't they? It's worth noting, or maybe not worth noting, but quite sad that when Paul got married to Linda, no Beatle was here. Anyway, moving on. So after John Lennon was arrested at Montague Square where we just were, it was here where very famous pictures of John Lennon surrounded by police with Yoko Ono being carried, mauled into the Magistrates court. It looks like, from what I can see, it was more like this wall where you can see John, the picture. And we've been coming into the Magistrates court here. And it was because of this that he had so much trouble with his green card in America, and they were trying to chuck him out of America. It all happened from here. John pleaded guilty. He was fined £150 plus 2 guineas. That happened there. I think it was around, it looks more like here, the pictures you see of him, quite famous pictures, aren't they? Anyway, Marleybone train station now. I think that's just up here. If you can't tell, I'm getting quite tired. I'm on 20,000 steps on this walk, and I've still got to get to St John's Wood. Now about that like, and subscribe. So, if you watch the Hard Day's Night, you'll know this bit. This is where you see them running into Marleybone station. It's portrayed as Lime Street, isn't it, in the film? But it's here at Marleybone. You see him run where, I'll take you to where they've run down. That's Boston Place, that's just around the corner. This is where you see him run into, and the telephone kiosk you see him using when they're hiding is in what is now M&S. And if you just bear with me, I'll just put a mask on and then I'll show you inside. You can see the old phone bit on the wall. That's where they would have would have been where they and this is Boston Place. This is right next to the Marleybone train station, and it's where you'd see the Beatles run down. There's also a sign for Maida Vale up there, and I think Maida Vale's near Abbey Road, so I think I'm going the right way. This is where you see the Beatles run down, and you see, I think it's George falls over, doesn't he? And John laughs. This is where they're running down. Very iconic film scene in a way, isn't it? Not just Beatles thing, but they were running to the sandwich shop. We all knew Ringo liked a ciabatta. I think ciabattas existed in the 1960s in England. Anyway, this is Boston Place. Also, still on Boston Place, where the Beatles ran down, in the anthology 3, the Hey Jude, When I Was a Robber in Boston Place. Don't know if it refers to here. Probably. And as he was running, maybe that's what that reference in the anthology means. Although I'm fairly sure he says in Boston Place, he puts on a Boston accent. Who knows? Not me. We never lost control. Right. Abbey Road. So this is Abbey Road, probably the most famous Beatle location. Never short of a tourist or two is Abbey Road. There we go. The famous zebra crossing, which nobody uses as a zebra crossing. Hell of annoying if you're driving. Sorry.
Right, go. Oh, no, there's a car down.
And this is Abbey Road Studios. Wow, I've never seen it look like this. Crazy, isn't it? I don't think it's an exaggeration to say the Beatles pretty much changed, certainly changed music, probably changed culture from within their Studio 2. Years. The Beatles first came here in June of 1962, pre-Ringo Starr. They came here with Pete Best to record Love Me Do, and they came back, bless them, in They came back in September of that year to finish Love Me Do. They were last here in January of 1970. Without John, but they finished up what we've all just finished watching, the Let It Be album. They did I Me Mine. So within those 8 years, they pretty much changed everything, and you still listen to the Beatles today, and I'll turn you around one sec. You still listen to the Beatles today and they don't sound out of place. If you look at footage of the 1960s, it looks crazy old, but the music doesn't sound that old. That's probably why they're so massive to this day, and still by far the best band ever. And that's probably an opinion, but anyway, that's the end. No, it's not. I've got one more place actually. I'll do the end there. Right, we're heading to our last location, the home of Paul McCartney. Down here, pretty much the pinpoint between Lords and Abbey Road. Lords is a famous cricket ground, or the home of cricket. But another story for another day. Paul McCartney bought this place in 1965 for £40,000. I suppose in 65 that was ridiculous, but God knows what it'll be worth. It is a beautiful area of London, St John's Wood. But he didn't move in until 1966. He had some work done on it, and he didn't live here much from the late 70s. Him and Linda didn't really live here, but after her death he was here quite a bit. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of filming where they actually live. I don't know why, but it is back there. We all deserve privacy. From the late 60s, you would see lots of people there. There's a light on, who knows? He might have been here for New Year's. The picture of the ballad in John and Yoko, the single cover, that would have been taken here. That's probably a famous Beatle thing that happened here. But yeah, the home of Paul McCartney. So I'm always a bit funny about filming outside people's houses when I know they live there. When I said before he left Jane Asher's, this is where he came. I'm going to get the tube back, and there used to be a Beatles cafe in there. I'm not sure if it still is. If there is, I'll show you that. But thanks so much for watching. It's been really long time to film. Shattered, to be honest. So please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. I think this is the last London video, so who knows why next. Thank you again so much. Happy New Year. It is the 1st of January. Have a great one. Peace. So yeah, we do come to Abbey Road. And the Beatles coffee shop here. It is closed as it's New Year's Day now. Anyway, thank you for your hospitality.